Well, we can already tell this is probably going to be the largest celebrity legal mess of the year. And I mean, this dumpster fire has been going on for a minute. And it all started with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. They were starring together in a movie about a toxic relationship. Both are playing the lead roles. What could go wrong? Well, apparently a whole lot, because what nobody expected, the dynamic between the main actors in real life, was almost as bad as the dynamic of the characters in the movie. And whatever happened on set at the same time eventually spiraled into a double lawsuit that's still ongoing to this day. So, the people that we're talking about today, we have Justin Baldoni. He's a 42-year-old director, actor, and podcast host, and he's a guy who's spent years branding himself as one of Hollywood's most vocal advocates for gender equality. He wrote a book about redefining masculinity, hosted a TED Talk on the same topic, and spent the better part of a decade positioning himself as a feminist ally. He co-founded a production company called Wayfarer Studios in 2019, and in the same year, he bought the rights to adapt Colleen Hoover's novel, It Ends With Us. And this book tells the story of Lily Bloom, a woman who builds her dream life just to find herself in a toxic relationship with a man she loves. And by 2021, it really took off on Book Talk and became one of the most best-selling novels in the world. And since Baldoni had been sitting on the rights for the book for about 2 years at the time it went super viral on Book Talk, now suddenly it's getting a movie. Essentially, it seems like it became a big priority once it went trending on TikTok. So fast forward to January of 2028. Blake Lively, who's now 38, is best known for her role in Gossip Girl, and also she's married to Ryan Reynolds. She was casted as the lead, Lily Bloom. And she didn't only sign on to be the film's star, no, she also signed on to be the producer, giving her a formal seat at the creative table from day one. Meanwhile, Justin over here also took a dual role, stepping in both as director and the film's male lead, Ryan Kincaid, Lily's unhealthy partner. So, Colleen Hoover herself was thrilled with both decisions, publicly describing Blake specifically as her dream casting choice. On paper, it all seemed great. In practice, though, not so great. At least these two people working together. So we'll get into it. Because, I mean, this became one of the messiest productions Hollywood has seen in recent years. There's a reason why this channel highlights the internet's most ridiculous moments, just like there's a reason why Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Because when you're seriously hurt, your injury could be worth millions of dollars. And if you're injured by someone else's negligence, you deserve to be paid. And Morgan & Morgan does not settle for lowball offers. With over $30 billion recovered for clients, Morgan & Morgan knows a thing or two about fighting for the compensation you deserve. And with over 1,000 lawyers and hundreds of offices nationwide, it's kind of like having an entire army on your side. Not all law firms are the same, because if you hire the wrong one, you may lose before you even get started. So if you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/Atozy. And if you end up working with them, their fee is completely free unless you win. And you can find the link at the top of the description down below to see if you actually have a claim. But without further ado, let's continue the video. So the filming kicked off in May of 2023 in Hoboken, New Jersey, though production paused almost immediately due to Hollywood's writers and actors strikes. So we had some delays there, but it picked back up in January of 2024, and the movie eventually wrapped up and was scheduled to release in August of 2024. But it wasn't until the film's press tour that people realized, uh-oh, this might be a mess, because it didn't take long for people on social media to notice that Baldoni and Lively were never in the same room. So essentially, they did their press completely on their own, and at no point did they appear in the same interview. And at the New York premiere on August 6th, they didn't even take a photo together. So here you have Lively posing with her husband and co-stars, while Baldoni essentially just attended with his family separately. Okay, and not to mention at this point in the story, Blake Lively was already drawing a lot of criticism on her own, since, you know, the two leads never appeared in any joint interviews. I mean, their press runs felt completely disconnected, and the focus of their messaging didn't even line up at all. So many people felt that Lively wasn't treating the film's most important themes with enough seriousness. She also leaned more into the lighthearted promotional tone, encouraging fans to wear florals and grab their friends for a fun night out, which, for a story centered around violence and a toxic relationship, struck a lot of people as a little bit off-key. Then on top of that, she was also promoting her hair care line at the same time, which only added to the perception that the messaging was just all over the place. And then around the same time, a 2016 interview with a Norwegian journalist resurfaced and went viral, where Lively came across as quite dismissive and rude, which added even more fuel to the growing negativity surrounding her online, with people starting to go, wait, this is actually starting to feel like a pattern here.
First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Did the interviewer only ask one question in the first minute and 30? Because all she said was congratulations on your little bump, hinting towards, you know, Like, congratulations on your upcoming baby. Like,
First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
What about my bump?
and then they start asking the interviewer questions.
Did you guys love wearing those kind of clothes that you...
Okay, so that was the first question at 30 seconds.
She wants to talk about the clothes, but I wonder if they would ask the men about the clothes.
There's
I
so
feel
much
like-
warmth of everything, you know.
Yeah, it's not just
She
the
tried to
women
ask a
that-
question,
that
but
have
was
the clothes. I
talked
think
over
they
there.
Get the conversation, but it's like
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, she only asked one question the first like minute and 30 seconds. I mean, this interview isn't a good look for them. They look a little bit too full of themselves, to put it lightly. Regardless, moving on. People, I guess, saw this and they were like, uh-oh, there's a pattern here. Now, Baldoni, on the other hand, he was doing solo press where he spoke thoughtfully about the movie's themes, which only made the contrast stand out even more. And at the time, it mostly just felt like there might have been some behind-the-scenes tension during filming. But I guess nothing major, which was, you know, the most plausible reason they never worked together. And I guess because of the interviews, the optics seemed to favor him over her. That perception would flip real quick by December though, because apparently there was a lot going on behind the scenes. And depending on who you ask, you get very different stories. So to put it lightly, it was very chaotic. But according to Lively's account, which is laid out later on in her legal filings, the set was not a comfortable place to be on from early on. And she described a pattern of behavior from Baldoni and one of his producing partners that she considered inappropriate, alleging that he improvised physical contact during filming that hadn't been discussed or agreed upon in advance, the crew members entered her trailer unannounced while she was getting changed or breastfeeding, and that inappropriate/explicit conversations were happening in her presence without her consent. She also claimed that she formally raised these concerns, which led to an all-hands meeting in January 2024, attended by both parties, their lawyers, and her husband. And after the end of the writers and actor strikes, there was a list of conditions returning to the set was presented and agreed upon. Now, Baldoni's version is considerably different. Not only is his legal team claiming that he was indeed pushed out of the premiere activities and directed to a different theater entirely, but also that the concerns Lively described were either minor miscommunications that were addressed at the time or completely made up. But on the question of the January 2024 meeting, his camp claimed that Lively's list of demands was largely exaggerated and that Ryan Reynolds behaved aggressively towards Baldoni at the same gathering. And then you had the creative side of things. So Lively, as a producer, had significant involvement in the film's direction, something Baldoni himself acknowledged publicly at the time, calling her contributions essential. But reports later surfaced that during post-production, she worked with her own editor to put together an alternate version of the movie, which was apparently separate from the version Baldoni had been developing. And the editor that she brought in had previously worked on her husband's movie, Deadpool and Wolverine, which was also released around the same time. And at the end, the film studio decided to go with Lively's cut. Oh, and apparently Ryan Reynolds also contributed dialogue to at least one scene, which surprised even the film's original screenwriter when it came out. So I mean, this is just such an interesting situation because you have, remember, Justin Baldoni's company who bought the rights to do this movie. He is the director and the lead male role. Then he brings on Blake Lively as a producer, but also the lead female role. They need each other for this movie to work. And Justin Baldoni's company is either going to lose a whole bunch of money or a whole bunch of investor money if this movie is not released. And now suddenly you have two different cuts of the movie. Okay. But that's when we get to December of 2024, when public perception of the entire situation would completely flip because more details were revealed. So on December 20th, Lively filed a formal complaint with the California Civil Rights Department, a legal step taken before a lawsuit, accusing Baldoni and his production company, Wayfarer Studios, of harassment, creating a hostile work environment, and retaliation. Then the next day, the New York Times published a full investigative report on the matter, titled, "Can We Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine?" Uh-oh. The article described an organized operation allegedly running as Baldoni's crisis management team, featuring text messages among his publicists, discussing ways to damage Lively's reputation through social media manipulation and planted stories. And like the headline put it, at one point an alleged publicist even wrote that they could bury anyone if they ever needed to. What does that mean? I'm hoping they're saying bury them with bad PR, right? So I mean, it was safe to say there was some backlash immediately because the same day that the Times piece was ran, WME, which was Baldoni's talent agency, decided to drop him. Then on top of that, a nonprofit that just honored him days before retracted that reward. Then to make things even worse, his podcast co-host publicly resigned from the show. And not only that, but Sony Pictures, the studio behind his film, also issued a statement standing with Lively. And even Colleen Hoover herself, the book's author, posted in Blake Lively's support. So clearly, this was a massive dumpster fire now. So Baldoni's legal team, led by attorney Brian Friedman, denied everything, calling Lively's allegations false, outrageous, and a desperate attempt to fix her own reputation after the negative press that she'd received during the film's promotional tour. But on December 31st, she filed a federal lawsuit in New York against Baldoni and his associates. And at the same time, he filed a $250 million lawsuit against the New York Times for defamation, claiming the paper had published a misleading account using selective edited messages. But now, if December was the turning point, January made things so much worse, because on January 16, 2025, Baldoni filed another $400 million lawsuit directly against Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and their publicist. And the complaint was almost 180 pages and read kind of like a point-by-point takedown of Lively's narrative. And in his version of events, he argued that Lively had spent the production progressively expanding her control over the film, making script changes, bringing her husband into production, commissioning her own edit, and when the film's promotional cycle didn't go the way she hoped, she reached for the harassment allegations as, I guess, a way to shift the conversation. And not only that, the lawsuit also introduced an odd piece of alleged evidence in the whole saga, a text message in which Lively, referencing Reynolds and her close friend Taylor Swift, called them her dragons and compared herself to Daenerys, you know, the character from Game of Thrones. And this is kind of the point when me and my research team started looking at each other like, what's going on here? This is not a normal story that we cover here on this channel, but it was just so, number one, big, but also bizarre that I felt like I had to cover it. But we're still, in a way, kind of just getting started. Because how did a production of a single film spiral into something this bizarre? Like, this is turning into a complete circus. But the implication his team drew from this was essentially that Lively regularly used her relationships with powerful people to apply pressure, and that Baldoni had been on the receiving end of that pressure throughout the production. Lively's team then responded by calling this as another chapter in what they described as a pattern of retaliation against women who speak out. So essentially, we're sitting in a massive he said, she said. So by the end of January, a federal judge has consolidated the cases, set a trial date for early 2026, and I guess warned both legal teams multiple times to stop talking about this to the press. But it didn't really make any difference, and both sides just kept doing exactly what they've been doing all the way up until this point. So I mean, by May of 2025, the case had already pulled in Ryan Reynolds, a former crisis PR team, a Texas-based social media contractor, a former publicist who sued Baldoni herself, and Lively's personal publicist. And now, in the same month, Baldoni's team subpoenaed Taylor Swift as a witness. Hold up, what is going on here? Because they argued that Taylor had been present at a meeting early in the production where Lively allegedly used her friend's influence to pressure Baldoni into accepting a script rewrite, essentially alleging that her presence at the meeting was a show of force here. And then you have Taylor's spokesperson responding almost immediately with a statement saying that the singer had never been on the set and wasn't involved in any of the production decisions and hadn't even seen the finished film until weeks after it was released. And then on top of that, the only connection to It Ends With Us was licensing one song, the same thing 19 other artists had done, calling the whole thing a move to get the media to write about it disguised as a legal strategy. So then, less than a month later, to make matters even worse for Justin, on June 9th, 2025, a judge dismissed both of Baldoni's lawsuits, the $400 million case against Blake Lively and the $250 million case against the New York Times. The ruling found that Lively's original harassment allegations were legally protected, having been raised as a part of the formal complaint process, which meant they couldn't serve as the basis for a defamation claim. And as for the Times, the judge determined that the publication had reported on what they believed was true based on the available evidence and had no intention to favor one party over the other. So the judge gave Baldoni a window to refile a narrowed version of some of the claims around the contractual issues. He was also set to do so. But then he missed the deadline and didn't file anything. So by October 31st, Lively was the only party to respond when the judge reached out, leaving her claims moving forward, with her request for legal fees still on the table. Now, throughout late 2025 and into 2026, things mostly turned into a slow drip of unsealed documents. Depositions and text messages just kept the story alive, even without major courtroom developments. Then you had testimony from Jenny Slate, who was Lively's co-star on the film, became public, in which she described feeling repulsed and deeply irritated by Baldoni's behavior on set. And the text messages between them were basically about frustration during filming, with Jenny describing the environment as disturbing and Lively pointing to specific incidents she felt were inappropriate, including one which Baldoni remarked on her body that she said had nothing to do with her character or the scene they were filming. But the documents also included text messages between Lively and Taylor Swift, which gave both sides something to work with. So Baldoni's camp highlighted messages in which Lively referred to him as a doofus and asked Taylor to endorse a script rewrite, to which she said she would do anything for her. Lively's camp, meanwhile, pointed to December 2024, from days before the lawsuit became public, where Taylor described the situation as a horror film that nobody knew was happening, framing, I guess, this as a friend recognizing how serious things were for Lively. Then also, what was unsealed were internal documents and emails from Baldoni's PR team laying out the strategy around managing Lively's public image, including executing plans without leaving any fingerprints, which is, interesting wording. And then concerns about Taylor Swift's fan base as a genuine threat to the campaign, noting that their monthly fee had been raised specifically to account for the risk of Swifties mobilizing against them. And again, these expressions are kind of insane. Bury someone, don't leave fingerprints. What is going on here? I get that they probably never expected any of these messages to become public, but the fact that his own PR messages ended up being one of the things damaging Baldoni's image the most is ironic, to put it lightly. But in January of 2026, Baldoni's legal team filed a motion for summary judgment, essentially asking the court to throw out Lively's remaining lawsuit before it could reach a jury. Here they argued that the allegations amounted to nothing more than just basic workplace grievances that didn't rise to the level of harassment under the law. But the judge responded by noting during the arguments that a series of small things can collectively add up to something significant. And now we finally reach February 2026, when both parties sat down for the court-ordered mediation in Manhattan, their first time at the same location since the whole thing blew up. And here they spent roughly 6 hours in separate rooms, with a magistrate judge going back and forth between them, attempting to, broker a deal. Now, obviously, since we're still talking about it, it didn't work. So neither Lively nor Baldoni addressed the reporters as they left the courthouse. But when asked whether the case would settle, Baldoni's attorney said he was looking forward to trial. And that brings us to April of 2026, the month that we're currently in, because things are still happening. So the mediation failed. Both sides said they were ready for trial. And that's where things were, except the quote, ready for trial and getting along well enough to actually prepare for it turns out to be two very different things. Because as the May 18th date got closer, the pretrial process itself started turning into a little bit of a battleground. So Lively's legal team filed a letter accusing Baldoni's side of repeatedly asking for extensions, missing submission deadlines, and genuinely dragging their feet, saying the defendants had asked to push pretrial deadlines back at least 3 times in a single month, while her attorneys made it clear that she was ready to go and framed the delay request as yet another tactic. So a hearing was set to April 2nd to sort out the pretrial scheduling disputes. And as it turns out, April 2nd ended up being a much bigger day for this case than anyone really expected. Because not only did this hearing serve to set the schedule, but the presiding judge also decided to drop a 152-page ruling that knocks out 10 of Lively's 13 claims, including, most significantly, all of her harassment allegations. Okay, so the entire case just completely changed. And from what I understand, the reasoning is it's a bit of a legal technicality rather than any kind of verdict on what actually happened. But the first issue was about Lively's employment status. In order to bring harassment claims under federal law, you have to be classified as an employee. But the judge ruled that Lively, given the level of creative and contractual control that she had over the film, was actually an independent contractor, which means those federal protections didn't apply to her. Because she negotiated a 12-hour cap on filming days, she also had a 90% say in the music choices, oversaw which takes made it into the final cut, and brought her own editors and had equity in the film. So essentially, the judge said, yeah, that's not what an employee looks like. And the second issue was, I guess, geographic. Her California harassment claims couldn't move forward because the film was shot in New Jersey, not California. And then on top of that, there was a matter of specific contract called the Actor Loan-Out Agreement, or the ALA, which would have been a legal foundation for many of her claims, but Lively never actually signed it. So the two sides have been going back and forth over its terms for months during production, and because no final version was actually executed, the judge found that it was never binding to begin with. Then you have, for the discrimination allegation specifically, Lively had claimed earlier that Baldoni asked her personal trainer about her weight, and later introduced her to a specialist who worked in weight loss. And the judge ruled that in the context of a film where physical appearance of both leads were central to the story, and given that Lively herself had discussed the importance of the aesthetic and had been working out intensively to prepare for filming, those actions couldn't reasonably be labeled as body shaming. Then you have the dance scene claim, where Lively alleged that Baldoni improvised unscripted kisses while they were filming together, and that was also apparently dismissed. Here, the judge's reasoning was that the two of them were acting in a scene designed to show romantic tension, and that a degree of improv within the agreed upon context of the scene isn't automatically harassment. So a lot of people are probably asking now, what's left standing after all that? Well, you have three claims left. You have breach of contract, retaliation, and aiding and abetting retaliation. Those three are moving forward to trial now. And the retaliation claims, which center on the alleged PR smear campaign that Baldoni's team ran against Lively after she raised concerns on the set, survived because the judge found there was enough evidence for a jury to weigh in here. Now, predictably, both camps came out swinging after this ruling. Baldoni's lead attorney, Brian Friedman, framed it all as a full vindication, claiming the truth had prevailed and neither Baldoni nor his co-defendants harassed Blake Lively. And then you have Lively's team countering, saying that the harassment claims were dismissed not because nothing happened, but due to those technicalities, and said that the retaliation claim involving the alleged smear campaign has always been the central issue of the case anyway. I feel like this case has just given everyone whiplash, but the day after the ruling, both sets of lawyers were told to call in separately to update the court on where each side stood regarding a potential settlement. And I guess this is kind of like a last-ditch effort to check in and see, hey guys, are you sure you want to put this in front of a jury? But just like every time they tried to talk in this trial, yeah, it didn't go anywhere. Both sides said no, we are not settling, with only 3 remaining claims. So now both sides are going to trial starting May 18th with 3 claims remaining. And to be honest, I mean, there's no clean answer. I mean, we just kind of have to wait and see what happens in trial. Because at the end of the day, you have 2 very different versions of events being argued by 2 people on separate sides. What will happen? Who knows? But I just wanted to make this entire video to summarize what was going on, because I think this is just a crazy situation and it's probably just gonna get crazier. So I mean, hey, if you're new here, feel free to subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like on it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.